G'day legends, Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway are still yet to set a date, and quite frankly, I'm sick of it, man. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of Ilia Topuria sitting out, not getting that goddamn fight booked. When is it going to happen, man? You know? I'm just like the champions these days. Like Drickus, right? Fights at the start of the year. Now he's gonna fight at the end of the year in Australia. That's like he's only fighting twice a year. Like Ilia Topuria, he might only fight twice this year. Like Leon Edwards, man, he's sitting out constantly. I'm sick of that. Like what? He fights like once a year. Tom Aspinall wins their interim heavyweight championship, fights once this year. I'm sick of it, man. I'm sick. I'm done with it. I'm done with Sean O'Malley. When is he gonna fight again? When are we gonna get a goddamn move on, bro? Like, these champions are just sitting around doing nothing. Thank God for Pereira. Thank God for Pereira being crazy enough to step in at short notice. He's like the face of the UFC, right? You know what I mean? Like, thank God for Pereira. I'm kidding, by the way. You might not have realized that, but I'm kidding right now. What I'm doing is the sentiment of a lot of modern day fans in the UFC. And I don't want to be like, I get it, right? I get it when you like been watching the UFC for a long time or you listen to MMA content. There's like these people out there that think they have this like higher authority to be speaking about MMA or talking down to new fans. And I don't want this video to come off that way, because I do think the more fans that the sport gets, the bigger and more epic the moments can get down the line, and the more money that gets pumped into it, the more the UFC grows. You know, fighter pay has gone up with the UFC growing. Not as fast as it could, but it has gone up with the UFC growing. So I think new fans coming into the sport is a generally good thing, but there is a lot of sentiment going around out there about how inactive the champions are at the moment. This era that we're in, that seems to be a very slow era. And I just need to pump the brakes on that for a second here, because we are pretty much in business as usual. I think what is happening here, what we are seeing here, is that we got a lot of new fans during 2020 when we were the only sport on television. A lot of new fans. And welcome. It's great to have you here. Quite a lot of you are very hardcore. You sit through every single Apex card. It's wonderful. But you do need to just pump the brakes a little bit on getting angry at DDP, getting angry at Leon Edwards, getting angry at Ilia Topuria, and saying, thank God that Alex Pereira is here. Because what happened during that era when the new fans came over to the UFC, came over to MMA, is that we were in a flash in the pan moment with the three kings. And I'm talking about the real three kings. Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, and Alexander Volkanovski. They're the real three kings in my heart, okay? They were exceedingly, incredibly active. And you know what? I'm going to chuck on Valentina Shevchenko as well. She was very active as well. But that moment of them being super active was a little bit of a flash in the pan. Israel Adesanya particularly, always being able to call out that next opponent, even if the next opponent that he was calling out wasn't really the number one contender, it kept Israel Adesanya busy and it kept him going. And Alexander Volkanovski clearly has mental issues when he's not preparing to punch somebody so hard in their face, their nose starts to fall off. Whether that's the Korean zombie, or Brian Ortega, or Max Holloway. If Volkanovski isn't planning on cooking some meat or cooking some faces, he is falling into a deep, dark pit of depression. So, you know, we were in that special stage. And then, of course, there was Kamaru Usman, who was pretty much just getting handed George Masvidal over and over again, no matter how ready George Masvidal was. But that was very much a flash in the pan moment in MMA. And I'm going to prove it to you, because I went back onto Wikipedia, and you can do this too to check my sources if you can be bothered. I went back onto Wikipedia, and if you type in 2011 in UFC, it will show you all of the events, and it will also have a list of the title fights that happened, right? Every single one will be there. Now, I didn't go all the way back to UFC 1 because I'm not some bloody nerd, mate. All right? I'm not some bloody mixed martial academic that's going to go and do all the homework. I'm just a guy with a smartphone that puts out some pretty great MMA content, if I don't say so myself. I'm just kidding. I'm just chucking it out there. So I went and had a quick look. I started at 2012 and went all the way up to 2019 when Israel Adesanya came into the UFC. And I'm going to prove to you categorically that what we are seeing today in 2024 in the UFC is just business as usual. It is the way that the UFC has been for the vast majority of the time. So check this out. In 2012, most of the champions fought twice, if not once. Benson Henderson was the only champion to fight 3 times. In 2013, flyweight competed 3 times. Demetrius Johnson, everyone else competed once or twice. In 2014, bantamweight competed 3 times. It was TJ Dillashaw that competed twice. Everyone else fought mostly once. Lucky there was a changing of the belt in 2014, otherwise it would have been 1 or 2 title defenses. In 2015, light heavyweight competed 3 times, and it was DC competing 3 times as well, which is actually very, very rare. And then women's bantamweight was competed for 3 times, Ronda Rousey competing twice. Women's strawweight competing 3 times, with Yuliana Jędrzejczyk 3 times. But I do want to point out here, in 2015, where you've got light heavyweight being competed for 3 times, right? You've got women's bantamweight being competed for 3 times and women's strawweight being competed for 3 times. The women's divisions were the new divisions. So they were bringing in competitors from all different sporting organizations. They weren't fostering a single, streamlined rankings in the UFC. This was the women being brought into the UFC. So having three weight divisions being competed for 3 times in 2015 was a very flash in the pan moment. Up until then, it was literally just, you'd be lucky to get a single division competed for 3 times. In 2016, same thing. You had Dominic Cruz competing 3 times for bantamweight. You had women's bantamweight competing 3 times with Amanda Nunes. You had welterweight being competed for 3 times with Tyron Woodley competed for twice. So again, if it wasn't for the women, you'd have just the men competing 3 times per year in 2016. Only twice. Only 2 men's divisions would have done it. In 2017, every single title was either once or twice, except for women's featherweight, where it was Cyborg and Holly Holm competing against each other twice, and women's featherweight fought 1 more time. So in 2017, every other division was just once or twice. In 2018, heavyweight fought 3 times, with DC competing twice. By the way, that is heavyweight's most active year, and every other championship fought once or twice. And in 2019, when Israel Adesanya finally becomes champion, no title was contended for 3 times. Literally, for 8 years straight that I could be bothered looking up, from 2012 to 2019, when Izzy started and things started to get more active, so you would even say from 2020, most titles are only ever competed for once or twice in the UFC. It is pretty much you get 1 title a year that is getting competed for 3 times. And when the women were introduced into the UFC, that's when things started to spice up a little bit as they were getting those divisions moving. But now that has seemed to have fallen in line with the way the UFC was operating before women got there. What we have now in 2024, with a champion winning a belt and defending it maybe once during that calendar year, is completely business as usual. So next time we are on Twitter or we're on any social media and we're whinging about how inactive the champions are, when is O'Malley going to sign a contract? When is Ilia Topuria going to get on with it? He's been touring all of Europe just showing his belt off. This is completely normal. This is the way things have been in the UFC all the way up to the 3 kings getting here. So just chill out a little bit, take a deep breath. I know it was very exciting back in 2020 when we were the only thing on TV and there were fights on every single weekend. But now that things are happening this way, this is the regular status quo of the UFC. So just chill out, boys. All right? Let me know what you think about this video down there in the comments. Would you like to see champions more active? Do you think champions should be stripped if they do not defend their title at least once in a calendar year? What is a good turnaround time for a UFC champion? Put it down there in the comments. If you like this video, give it a like. If you really like this video, consider subscribing to the channel. Until then, you guys all have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.